Welcome to the deep dive. So you wanted to understand the differences between capitalism and socialism, huh? Well, based on the research you provided, let me tell you what we found might surprise you. We dug into academic excerpts, economic analyses, and even some historical perspectives.
Yeah, what I think is so fascinating is that we're not just going to define these terms.
Right.
We're really going to uncover how these systems actually impact wealth, work, and even your, everyday life.
Okay, so capitalism versus socialism.
Right.
Most people think they know what those terms mean, but I'm already sensing it's not that simple.
Yeah, you're right. The textbook definitions, they're a good starting point.
Yeah.
But I think what's much more revealing are the core values driving each system.
Yeah.
So capitalism really emphasizes, individual initiative, competition,
Yeah.
and this belief that this leads to innovation and overall prosperity.
So like a survival of the fittest, but in
Yeah.
the economic world.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
Now, contrast that with socialism, which focuses on the collective good. It emphasizes reducing inequality and ensuring everyone's basic needs are met.
Interesting. So to really understand the differences,
Yeah.
we have to go beyond just who controls the means of production
hmm
and look at these values underpinning each system.
Absolutely. And one point I want to highlight early on,
Yeah.
neither system truly exists in a pure form in the real world.
Right.
Almost every economy is a blend,
Yeah.
what we call a mixed economy.
Okay.
But we'll dive into that a little bit later.
Okay, so before we get into real-world examples, the research you sent also included a lot about the socialist critique of capitalism.
Right.
I think it's important to understand that perspective.
It's crucial. And to be clear, this is not about taking sides or anything.
Of course. Of
It's
course.
about understanding different perspectives to form, a well-rounded view.
So what are some key criticisms that stood out to you from what we read?
One major point is the concept of worker exploitation.
Yeah.
Socialists argue that capitalism is built on extracting surplus value from workers.
Surplus value.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for me and our listener?
Yeah, so it boils down to this. Workers are paid less than the full value of their labor,
Okay.
and that difference, the surplus, becomes profit.
Okay.
One study we looked at found that in the tech industry, for example, the value generated by, programmers often far exceeds their compensation,
Right.
with a significant surplus flowing upwards.
Okay. That makes the concept of surplus value a lot more concrete for me. I
Right.
see how that could be a point of contention.
Yeah.
But doesn't capitalism also drive progress? I mean, we've seen so much innovation, so much technological advancement.
That's a valid point.
Hmm.
Capitalism does have a track record of fostering innovation.
Right.
However, critics argue this often comes at a social cost.
Such as.
Well, for example, socialists talk about the alienation of labor. In a system that's so focused on efficiency and profit,
Right.
workers can become really disconnected from their work,
Right.
feeling like cogs in a machine rather than individuals contributing to something, meaningful.
Yeah.
They might not see the fruits of their labor or feel a sense of ownership.
So it's not just about the wages,
Right.
it's about how the work itself impacts people's lives and their
Consider that.
sense of purpose. That's interesting.
Exactly. And then there's also this argument that capitalism commodifies everything, putting a price tag on every aspect of life.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these socialist critiques really challenge some fundamental assumptions about capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
But how does this play out in the real world? Where, as you mentioned, most economies are a mix of these ideas.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it leads us perfectly to the concept of mixed economies.
Right.
As I mentioned before, most modern economies, they blend capitalist and socialist elements.
Okay.
It's not an either situation.
So more like a spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm imagining countries trying to find that sweet spot between, individual freedom and collective well-being.
Precisely. Think of it as a balancing act, really.
Okay.
I have private ownership
Right.
alongside government regulation,
Yeah.
social safety nets,
Okay.
like healthcare and education,
Yeah.
and even strategic government intervention in certain industries.
So a country could have a free market,
Mhm.
but also provide, like universal health care, for example.
Right.
Kind of picking and choosing from both systems.
Exactly. And many countries with, capitalist foundations, they've adopted policies to address income inequality, which is, of course, a core socialist concern.
Right, which brings us to another big point from the research you sent, income inequality.
Yeah.
It's a major point of debate when comparing these systems, right?
Absolutely. One of the studies we dug into showed that socialist economies tend to have lower income inequality than capitalist ones.
But, one concern I have
Yeah.
is that by, aggressively reducing inequality, you might stifle innovation. Did the research you provided address that trade-off at all?
Yeah, it's a valid concern, and the research did touch upon that.
Okay.
It's not a simple equation,
Right.
Remember, we're not talking about everyone being equally poor,
Right.
but rather about ensuring a basic standard of living
Yeah.
and a fair shot at economic opportunity for everyone.
Right.
And some argue that, a strong social safety net can actually encourage risk-taking and entrepreneurship.
Interesting. So how does socialism actually redistribute wealth?
Yeah.
Like, what are some concrete examples from what you read?
Well, one common method is progressive taxation,
Okay.
where higher earners pay a larger percentage of their income in taxes.
Right.
And this, of course, helps fund those social welfare programs, things like
Mhm.
unemployment benefits, food assistance, universal health care.
Yeah.
And, of course, minimum wage laws play a role, too.
Right.
These are all ways to ensure that resources are shared more equitably.
So these policies act as a sort of leveling mechanism, even if it means putting some limits on individual wealth accumulation.
Yes, it's about finding that balance.
Okay.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
you provided some research on the drivers of inequality within capitalist systems.
Right.
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, it's clear that even in capitalist systems, inequality is this complex issue with many contributing factors.
Right.
The research highlighted things like exploitation of labor and that surplus value concept we talked about earlier.
Right. We have to remember that in a globalized,
Yeah.
increasingly automated world,
Yeah.
these factors become even more intertwined.
It's almost like regardless of, which economic system a country chooses, there are these larger forces at play
Right.
that impact how wealth is distributed.
Exactly. One source really emphasized how globalization, while connecting the world in many positive ways,
Right.
it can also create winners and losers within countries, not just between them.
Right. Right.
And automation, well, it often benefits capital owners more than workers.
Because robots don't need healthcare or demand raises.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which raises a big question.
Yeah.
What happens as automation makes certain jobs obsolete?
Right.
What does that mean for the future of work?
It's a question we all need to be thinking about.
Mm.
How do you see your own work changing in the future, listener? Are you excited or worried about automation?
Bringing it back to a point we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
the research you sent also highlighted concerns about the exploitation of workers,
Okay.
specifically in low-wage jobs.
Yeah, that definitely stood out to me.
Yeah.
The research seemed to suggest it wasn't just, a few bad apples, but a systemic issue.
Right.
How does this benefit the wealthy exactly?
The sources provided some compelling details.
Okay.
Corporate profits, executive compensation, shareholder returns.
Yeah.
They all can benefit from keeping wages low, even when worker productivity is high.
So it's not just about companies being cheap. It's,
Right.
a calculated strategy to maximize those at the top.
It can be. And this is where the ethical dimensions of these systems become really apparent.
Right. If a company can afford to pay more,
Yeah.
but chooses not to, is that exploitation?
Mm.
It's a complex question with no easy answers.
Absolutely. And of course, companies have justifications for keeping wages low.
They do, yeah. Did the research offer any counter arguments to that, to the idea that companies need to keep wages low?
Oh, yeah, several.
Mm-hmm.
The readers outlined, those common justifications like maintaining efficiency, investing in training.
Yeah.
But it also highlighted the perspective of some economists who argue that higher wages can actually boost productivity in the overall economy.
That connection between wages and productivity is fascinating. I mean, it really challenges those traditional assumptions we often hear. How does that work exactly?
Well, when people have more money,
Yeah.
they spend more, which stimulates demand.
Right.
And happier, better paid workers tend to be more productive.
Okay.
So, it's a complex debate with valid arguments on both sides.
So we've gone deep into capitalism, socialism, and how they play out in the real world.
Yeah.
But what does this all mean for our listener?
Right.
What should they be taking away from this deep dive?
That's the big question, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think it's clear that, neither system is perfect.
Right.
And each presents its own set of challenges and opportunities.
And the balance between, individual freedom and collective well-being is constantly evolving.
Mhm.
It's a dynamic process shaped by so many factors.
Absolutely. And I think what's important and what I hope you'll take away from this
Yeah.
is a deeper understanding of the values at play within different economic systems.
Okay.
How do those values shape our lives, our work, the
Right.
world around us?
Exactly. And this isn't a one-time thing. Remember, the world is constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so are these systems.
Right.
Globalization, automation, the changing nature of work.
Right.
These are all forces that will continue to shape the conversation.
Yeah. It's an ongoing discussion. What works today might not work tomorrow.
Right.
And that's where you come in, listener.
Yeah.
We've given you the information, the different perspectives, the historical context.
Right.
Now it's up to you to keep learning, keep questioning,
Right.
keep forming your own conclusions.
We've presented the pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get to see how they fit together. What picture emerges for you?
And remember, there's no single right answer.
Right.
This is about engaging in these important conversations,
Yeah.
thinking critically,
Yeah.
and searching for solutions that work for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating exploration.
We covered a lot of ground, from the core values of capitalism and socialism to the complexities of mixed economies. We looked at income inequality, globalization, automation, and the ethical implications of, worker exploitation.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
Hopefully it sparks some new ideas and questions for you.
We encourage you to keep thinking critically about these topics and to keep the conversation going, because ultimately the future is in our hands.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters to you.